Okay, we ready to begin here? Okay, Stuart, just checking, can you hear me?
You're all good to go.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to welcome everybody to Sustainable Claremont's Dialogue series. And I'm going to be filling in for Stuart because he's got a little bit of a cold and tends to cough a little bit. So I'll be doing my best here to keep this going. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. First, these dialogues are something that Sustainable Claremont does almost every month. And to help support these dialogues, we always are open to donations. And if you go to our website, there's a button where you can make donations. And Stuart, I think maybe you'll put that into, thank you. Stuart just put that in the chat. Also, if you don't receive our newsletter, if you go onto our website, you can sign up for that. That goes out every month and is full of lots of interesting information about sustainability in the city. So before I introduce our speakers, I'm going to just ask that everybody hold their questions until the end. We'll have a question and answer period following the presentations. At that time, we'll have individuals either put their questions into the chat or you can use the raise hand function. So with that, let me get the introductions going. We're going to begin tonight with Paul Steinberg, who's professor of political science and environmental policy at Harvey College. And he's going to present a few results from the 2019 bicycle survey in Claremont to get things going. Following Paul, we will have Ashley Hare from Alta Planning to do a brief introduction to bicycle planning. And Ashley has been in the transportation industry for more than 21 years, focusing on active transportation since 2009. At Alta, Ashley supports design efforts across California and leads the planning group in projects that help strategically shape Southern California's bicycling and walking future. And finally, after Ashley does her presentation, 4 student teams from Paul's course, Bicycle Revolution, will share results from their final posters, which imagine redesigns to the streets of Claremont. And then following that, we will have time for question and answer sessions and wrap things up at 8 o'clock. So with that, Paul, I'll kick it over to you.
Okay, and let me go and share screen mode as I've got some slides. And shrinking this down, and there we go. Well, thank you, Hugh. As we can see in these pictures, all of which are right around First Street near Yale, Claremont has a long history of cycling. And so this sustainability dialogue is both an excellent example of the level of interest in cycling transportation in Claremont and a great chance, I think, to take stock of where we are as a city. So let me start briefly with the big picture. And that is, as probably everyone on this call knows, the United States has contributed more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere than any other country on Earth. And within the US, if you look at this graph on the left side, the transportation sector has taken over electricity generation as the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. And then looking at the image on the right, passenger vehicles are the biggest part of the transportation sector. Now, importantly, about 1/3 of those vehicle trips are less than 3 miles long. And so along comes the humble bicycle as a potentially important part of the picture here, in addition to its many other benefits for health and the reduction of local pollution and so forth. But of course, there are real challenges. And the challenge is that cycling is still not safe. These data from a couple of leading researchers in the field compare the United States to the UK, Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. And you can see that the fatality rate, and notice this isn't because of a higher number of riders, this is per distance cycled. The fatality rate is much higher in the United States than in other countries, and it's getting worse. So from this same research, this shows that whereas safety has been improving in these other countries, it's also been demonstrated statistically that it's due to investments in safe cycling infrastructure. It's actually getting worse in the United States over time. Within the United States, California is more dangerous than most. And so the color scheme here is a little misleading. You'll notice California is 4.4, which is right at that threshold between where its coloration scheme and that of Florida and other states. So safe cycling and active transportation generally is not just about making it convenient and safe for these folks. It's also about making it convenient and safe for these folks. That's the real standard. And the city of Claremont has a commitment to cycling in a number of important policy documents, including the general plan. And the question is, how is Claremont really doing? And so my colleague, Tanya Srabotnik, who is actually on this call from the East Coast, welcome Tanya, and I, working with about a dozen students, also recruited help from over 100 Claremont College students to conduct a survey of 450 citizens in Claremont to see what their experience has been with cycling. And I should note that they were not approaching experienced cyclists, but rather it was a somewhat randomized selection of citizens throughout the city who broadly are representative of the demographics of Claremont. And these are in-person surveys conducted at several points throughout the city. So what did we find? First of all, there's significant unmet demand for cycling in Claremont. Now, if you look at the top row here, 2/3 to 3/4 divided by gender, which actually have ridden their bike at some point within the last year, okay? And importantly, look at the percentage that wish they could ride more. And this gender differential is actually the focus of our research. I'm not going to be focusing on that today, but it represents a trend that you see globally in any place that doesn't have adequate infrastructure for safe cycling. Women bike less, even though they are pedestrians at equal rates to men. So this percentage, there's a lot of folks that wish that they could bike more in Claremont. So what's the problem? Why aren't they biking more? Well, we asked which of the following reasons prevent you from riding more? And the standout here is safety. And again, with a big gender differential. And again, this is representative of research results we see in other places. People are worried about the safety when it comes to cycling. In fact, we asked, do you know someone personally who's been injured while riding a bicycle in Claremont? And fully 43% of respondents said yes, they know someone personally who's been injured. We then asked, what do you consider the most dangerous areas to ride a bike in Claremont? And this visual, this word incident is just a statistical word for the program use. That doesn't mean accidents, okay? But the color scheme shows what people perceive to be the most dangerous areas. No surprises there. The intersections along Foothill, Indian Boulevard, Arrow, and the like, and Mountain are considered the most dangerous. And I should note, they were not asking, they were asking for themselves, and all of these respondents were adults. And so they were not asking about safety for kids, which is something that will feature more in the students' presentations later. All right, so what can be done about it? We asked which of the following improvements would be most important to you, and got some very interesting results here, but you can see that bike lanes and safe intersections are prominent among them. And so with that, let me end screen share and just note that what this sets up then is that there's a significant demand for cycling that is something that's prominent in Claremont, but not occurring at the level that people would like. And they've identified some of the changes that they'd like to see. And so with that, we're very privileged to have with us Ashley Hare, who, as Hugh noted, is one of the preeminent planners in this area. And we asked if Ashley could give us sort of a high-level view of some of the fundamentals of bicycle planning and infrastructure.
Thanks so much, Paul. Can you see my slide deck?
We can, Ashley.
Is it showing the whole PowerPoint or just this, the display?
It's showing everything. If you maybe go
Okay.
to the F5 or whatever.
I don't think that worked. Is it okay if I just show it like this? Okay. So I wanted to give a quick overview of some of the basics in bikeway planning, how we go about doing it, and some of the things that we consider in the process of coming up with bike plans. A few of the things that I wanted to talk about, this is a very quick overview. I could go into depth on any of these topics, but ways that we categorize bikeways and bicycle riders, how we design bikeways and plan out the networks in ways that people actually use them. And then with bike plan development, what are some other things that we consider? Paul mentioned safety. We also look at connectivity, and I'm going to talk about a few of those items. So the first item is how we categorize bikeways. In California, they use this system where they have class 1 through 4. And class 1 are the shared use path. These are for pedestrians and bicyclists. We have a really great network of these around the LA area. Class 2 and class 2B are striped bike lanes and buffered bike lanes. Class 3 are shared lanes. So these are conditions where you have a low speed, low volume street, ideally, where bicyclists are sharing space with motor vehicles. And then class 3B are the bike boulevards. These are similar types of streets, but that have traffic calming features as well to maintain low vehicle speeds and volumes. And then class 4, the one most recently added to Caltrans' suite of bikeway types, is the protected or separated bikeway. And in this case, we start with a striped bike lane, but then we also have some vertical or horizontal separation that makes a physical barrier between the bikeway and the adjacent vehicle lanes. So the types of bike riders that we have, we categorize bikeways. We also try to categorize our bike riders because it makes these things a little easier to talk about. And generally we break the types of bike riders into 4 categories. We have the strong and fearless. These are the folks who will ride in traffic, who aren't bothered by that speed and volume threshold. We have the enthused and confident. This makes up about 8% of any population in any given city. These are the folks who you'll see out riding, but they would really prefer to be on the bike boulevards or separated from traffic. But for short stretches, they're willing to share if they have to. The interested but concerned, Paul talked about the folks who would really like to ride more. And this is that group. In any given population, it makes up about 50% of the folks that we have. And then there's the no way, no how. People that we're not going to convince to get on a bike ever. It doesn't matter what we do or how safe we make conditions. And so the key with these categories of bicycle riders is that the strong and fearless and the enthused and confident riders are already out there riding around. But the group that we can reach and increase bicycling mode share the most are in this interested but concerned group. And so these are the folks we really want to be designing for. And one of the ways that we talk about the safety aspect and just the perceived safety, sometimes it's more about the perception than the actual safety on a facility, is the level of traffic stress. So how stressful is it for a bicyclist to ride next to or near moving vehicle traffic? And we categorize bikeways or conditions for riding into, again, 4 categories. We have LTS 1 through LTS 4. And LTS 1, these are the facilities that anybody is comfortable riding in. All ages, all abilities is how we talk about folks that we're gearing LTS 1 facilities to. LTS 2 are slightly less comfortable, but still good for most adults. LTS 3, these are the facilities where you may have mixed traffic or conditions that are somewhat less comfortable. And then LTS 4, these are the most uncomfortable situations. Very few people will be willing to ride in an LTS 4 type facility. And so how do we look at level of traffic stress? What are some of the factors that go into these decisions? One is the number of lanes. We use that as a proxy for vehicle volumes because often higher volume streets also have more traffic lanes, and it's easier to get the number of traffic lanes than getting traffic volumes. When there's more lanes, it's going to be more stressful. the separation between the bikeway and moving vehicle traffic. So when we have more separation, whether it's vertical or horizontal, more separation means less stress. You have a perceived buffer around you that makes it feel safer to be in that space. The speed limit or the posted speed, also that we usually use as a proxy for the prevailing speed. Again, higher speeds, higher stress for bicyclists. And then blockages in the bike lane. So this might be a garbage truck or a delivery vehicle or a garbage can. Anytime you have a bikeway that has a blockage in it, that means that the bicyclist has to leave that bike facility, go around that blockage and come back into that space. And every time you have to do that, it's a very stressful maneuver for the bicyclist. So what are some of the other things that we look at when we're doing bike planning? We look at origins and destinations. So where are people coming from? Where are they going to? Often we look at these things in terms of maybe residential neighborhoods as places that people are coming from, and then destinations like schools, parks, libraries, business districts, those types of things. And we try to connect bikeways between the origins and the destinations. We look at those origins and destinations and try to find low stress ways to connect them. So low volume streets, can we put in some bike lanes? Can we put in a bike trail? We also look at where are there existing bikeways. A lot of times communities have bikeways in place that maybe they're low stress already, or maybe if they're higher stress, we can come in and design them in ways that make them more comfortable. So turning them into shared use paths, these class 1s, or the class 4 separated bikeways. We also look at barriers to bike mobility. So in this area, we have a lot of freeways that may be intimidating. Even if there are places to cross underneath or above the freeway, those locations can be intimidating. Railroad tracks often cut off communities, sometimes topography. So park areas that are expansive or large hills, those types of things we try to design around. We also look at how we connect into surrounding communities. So you see here this image from South El Monte. We want to look at the communities around a particular jurisdiction and make sure that we're connecting the bikeways from one city to the ones in the next town over. Because if you get to the town border and your bike boulevard or your bike lanes are 2 blocks over and not connecting to where you are, that's going to be less helpful. And then also demographics. So where are people more likely to use bicycles? In areas where we have low income populations, sometimes those are areas with higher bicycling rates. Also areas with younger populations often can be places where people bicycle more. So we look at all of these things in conjunction with each other and develop bike plans based on these things together and the community's priorities. And just lastly, a few of the design resources that we use for bikeway planning and design. Federal and state and local jurisdictions often have their own design parameters, but these are a few of the documents that we refer to that provide guidance that's based on research and practice to develop bikeways in a way that is as safe as we can make them and encourage people to ride as much as possible. So, thank you.
Excellent. With that, we're going to transition to 4 student teams, each of whom has 3 minutes to present. Because students have much greater self-control than professors do, I have confidence that they'll be able to do this. So the teams, as you know, you're going to go in order 1 to 4. And please do make sure to have your names on the screen so we know who your team is, or if only one person is presenting, you might briefly mention the other team members if they're not on the slides, or if multiple people are on one camera, just sort of let us know who's there. All right, take it away, team 1.
Sorry, I didn't want to unmute. Hi, everyone. I'm Tanner, and this is Ingrid, and tonight we'll be presenting on our redesign on North Mills Avenue. So the street we looked at is North Mills between Foothill Boulevard and Baseline Road, immediately north of the Claremont Colleges. We focused in particular on the area surrounding Chaparral Elementary and the Chaparral and North Mills intersection. We kind of reimagined how this area could be more conducive to students walking and biking to and from school, as well as making it safer for the general public, given the street has been the site of numerous accidents this past decade. So from our walk audit, research, and discussions with stakeholders, we identified a number of key issues and solutions, and we'll be presenting on 2 of them tonight.
So one of the biggest issues, which Prof. Steinberg also discussed earlier, is related to bicycle safety. So looking at traffic data, there have been a number of bicyclist injuries and fatalities in North Mills Avenue, many of them involving automobiles. So here are some data for the accidents between 2011 and 2021. And you can see that 10 of the 24 accidents on this road involved bicyclists or pedestrians. So the solution we recommend to help with this issue is to add a 3-foot buffered bike lane on both sides of the road. So having this buffer increases the distance between motor vehicles and bicyclists, providing increased safety and comfort of riders. We also recommend painting these lanes green and having guides to the intersections to increase visibility. And then in the longer term, we suggest upgrading this to protected bike lanes by the sidewalk with the parking lane on the other side of the barrier, which further increases safety and comfort. And this is particularly important because we want to encourage elementary school students to bike to school. And we want both the students and their parents to feel safe doing so.
Yeah, so our second key issue we identified was that parents are parking in the southbound turn lane north of Chaparral Drive, which is in turn blocking traffic and forcing people trying to turn onto Chaparral to turn from the through lane here. Parents are also parking on the merge lane and bicycle lane immediately south of Chaparral, which also blocks traffic, as well as forcing cyclists through the intersection and straight into the through lane, which is a pretty serious safety concern. So we had 2 solutions for this. First, on the north side, we were going to shorten the turn lane and add an 8-foot parking lane. This would allow parents to use a greater portion of the street for parking instead of having to turn into Chaparral to pick up their kids. And on the south side, we want to replace the merge lane with an 8-foot parking lane and dedicated bike lane, as well as a path to the intersection like Ingrid mentioned. So this reflects the actual use of space as well as making safety improvements to facilitate this.
So the city expressed interest in looking at evaluation metrics to measure the success of this redesign. Based on our research, looking at metrics used by other cities in their bike plans, we determined some we think would be relevant. So these are 3 areas we think would be most important to focus on: safe routes to schools, bicycle safety, and the environment. And thank you to everyone here for taking the time to speak with us and help us throughout this project. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to questions after the presentations.
Excellent. Team 2, take it away.
Hello, I'm just going to set up the screen share real quick. Okay. Can you guys see the whole screen?
Yes, and just a reminder to all listeners that in the view box in your upper right, you can toggle between gallery view and speaker view, and then you can drag the middle bar left or right to make the slides bigger or smaller.
Fantastic. So team 2 focused on redesigning Indian Hill Boulevard near Claremont High School. So this is specifically the northern part of Indian Hill, past Foothill, close to Claremont High School, but suggestions for the street as a whole extend down past Foothill to make it more bicycle friendly. Okay, so the current issues with the situation at Claremont High School is that there are no bike lanes anywhere near the school except for the lane on Foothill, but nothing connecting Foothill to Claremont High School. The vast majority of students drive to school and is very enabled by the very large parking structure at the school that you can see on this Google Streets View image and also the photo below. There are very wide driving lanes on Indian Hill, which encourage fast driving. There's limited bike parking, and none of it is protected bike parking. And it's also in high traffic areas during school, making it hard for students to unlock their bikes after when school has been let out. And there have also been 19 cyclist and pedestrian collisions that have occurred within a 1/2 mile radius of Claremont High School in the past decade. Our goals are to increase road safety through traffic calming street design, and increasing the visibility of cyclists in key areas, to encourage active transportation to school via protected bike lanes on Indian Hill and protected bicycle parking at Claremont High School, and to improve accessibility by enabling bikes to enter current drop-off zones, slowing down auto traffic at peak times and making it safer for cyclists. First off, this is our general redesign for Indian Hill. As you can see, we have a class 4 protected bike lane and 2 smaller car lanes, which will discourage fast driving, as well as a slow down and drop off spot. And the protected bike lane with bollards allows students to walk from cars through the bike lane, and also allows the people in the bike lanes to be safe from cars pulling over into like if it was just a stripe barrier and getting doored. This is our redesign of Indian Hill Boulevard in front of the high school. We thought it important that students be able to cross safely from one bike lane to another. And so we have flashing beacons that alert cars when a pedestrian is going to cross, that will allow students to cross safely. And then they will be able to go up the Claremont High School South Road, as we were calling it, and to the protected bicycle structure, which I will show in the next slide. And this will also have a raised crosswalk and other traffic calming measures. And then finally, we will propose protected bike parking for 100 bikes at CHS behind the gym at the end of the South Road. This is conveniently out of the way, so students don't have to worry about it being in a high traffic area and making it hard for them to take their bikes out. It's safe, so they don't have to worry about their bikes being stolen. And it's also accessible through a low traffic route that we can easily put a bike path on. And so there is little danger of them being hit while they are on their way to the bike parking. Alrighty, that's our presentation. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, team 2. Let's go to team 3.
Awesome. Let me figure out how to share everything. All right. Is that shared okay?
That is currently a black screen that is loading. Yes, you're good.
Sweet. Well, hey, everybody. We are team 3. We're made up of myself, Thomas, Shelby, Henry, Ryan, and Zane. And we focused on road safety improvements around El Roble and Radiate School and along Mountain Avenue. So to jump in with a little bit of context, Mountain Avenue is home to a middle school, an elementary school, as well as a community senior center. The populations, of course, are dominantly target populations for folks who want to ride bikes, as well as some of Claremont's most vulnerable population. There are currently pedestrian and bike pathways along Mountain Avenue, but they're currently going underused, and there's definitely room for improvement. With that, I'll send it over to Zane.
So during our observation process in the course of our project, we identified 4 principal issues concerning El Roble, as well as the nearby segments of Mountain Ave. So the 4 main problems, first, drop-off hazards in the form of numerous cars idling or fully parking in the bike lanes, meaning that bikers can't actually use the lanes. The second being traffic backup and congestion, making conditions unsafe for riders and pedestrians. The third being drivers speeding while entering and exiting the school zone area. And finally, illegal U-turns that further add to congestion and dangerous road conditions. So our 4 proposed solutions to address these identified problems. The first one, to implement a protected bike lane to increase safety for riders and pedestrians by breaking up traffic. The second, traffic lights to allow students to cross the street in greater numbers and reduce unsafe street crossings. The third one being to implement speed bumps to slow down drivers, both while entering and exiting the school zone. And finally, to combat the illegal U-turns, it would be to replace the center lane with a median or green space of sorts, which will prevent illegal U-turns, as well as speeding, which will increase overall safety. And I'm going to pass it to Ryan.
Yeah, so once we'd kind of highlighted the main problems and our potential solutions to those problems, we went about working to redesign the streets on Mountain Avenue. Thomas, you can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So we actually created, using a online street mix software, potential redesigns for different sections of Mountain all the way from baseline down to the village. But we wanted to specifically focus on highly trafficked areas, which are particularly Mountain Avenue Elementary and then El Roble. And the one we want to highlight tonight particularly is the El Roble drop-off section. Currently, the bike lane ends before you actually reach the school, and the drop-off area is quite chaotic and potentially dangerous for both pedestrians and cyclists. So as you can see in this graphic, what we've proposed to do is add a protected bike lane for children riding to school, which is the one there on the left, which is actually something that's already in place at Mountain View Elementary. So it would just be continuing it down Mountain all the way to El Roble. And then also having a dedicated lane for drop off and pickup, as opposed to the kind of turn lane into the school that is there at the moment. The second main improvement we would suggest in addition to the bike lane is a light at the Mountain and Harrison intersection, which is the intersection that El Roble Intermediate is at. Currently, this is just a 4-way stop sign, which between the school and then also a retirement community that is directly across the street that Thomas alluded to earlier, we believe to be quite unsafe. So we would be advocating that there be a light put in place there, especially would be helpful for cyclists and during the busy drop off and pickup times. So just in the interest of protecting children going to school, members of the retirement community across the street, and then others choosing to commute their bikes from the neighborhoods up above Mountain down to the village, we believe both the light and the protected bike lanes would be the two biggest improvements in this regard. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And going to our final group before opening it up to discussion, group 4, go right ahead.
Yeah, let me just share the screen here. All right, is that sharing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So our group worked on a bike circulation plan for the Claremont colleges. I'm James, and I worked with Rob, Chloe, and Ria. So one of the biggest focuses of our circulation plan was focusing on student safety. So we conducted a survey with 129 students to see how many of them had crashed. And surprisingly, over a third of them had crashed or been crashed into. So as part of the survey, we're also wondering where it is that they crashed. So some of the most common crash sites, the top picture shown here is just outside the library, and the bottom picture is the intersection of North College Way and 6th Street. And the other one that isn't shown is the intersection of North College Avenue and East 6th Street. So some of the solutions we're proposing in our bike circulation plan is to add lighting, maybe along where the library is, so there's great lighting at night, and especially along 6th Street, and then also being able to add a pedestrian or bike crossing with flashing lights, like a previous group was talking about at these intersections, just so we can have clear areas where bikers and pedestrians are crossing. So relating to those areas as a whole, or where they fit in with the most common crash sites, that is where those yellow circles are. And this map is to show the connectivity currently of the bikeways for the Claremont colleges, with the blue showing the current bikeways and the red showing the proposed. So as you can see, it's fragmented. And we are proposing that that can be totally connected from the northern point at Mudd to the southern point on Pomona, just to increase the connectedness of the different colleges and students across the campuses, and also with the students within the Claremont colleges and the community of Claremont. So one of the problems that we were having with being able to have enough room for bikes to safely bike on the road is being able to have bike lanes and on street parking. So what we're recommending as part of that, as you can see in this top picture, there isn't a bike lane, and students talked about how they didn't feel safe when that was happening. And then on the middle picture, there isn't a bike lane there. This is on College Avenue. And then the bottom picture, there is a bike lane. So we're proposing that we're able to relocate one side of the parking to somewhere else, to another parking lot. And then part of that is also being able to identify where the most heavily trafficked areas are. And so we can make sure that there's adequate bike parking for that. And we're working with our colleges individually on issues or topics that can be addressed as just like the college, but then also being able to coordinate with all of the different colleges and the city of Claremont and the different authorities is something that we're still brainstorming about and trying to come up with a plan for. So our long-term goals are to develop like a bike-friendly university status. And so that's kind of in the future. But so thank you. And these are some acknowledgements and some people that were really helpful in our project.
Great job. Back to you, Hugh.
Great. All right. Thank you very much to all the presenters and the students. That was great work. We'll open it now for question and answer period. And actually, I might just kick it off with a question. I think probably for you, Paul, but anybody else could answer. I know Maria is on this call as well. I'm curious what the current planning status is for bicycling in Claremont. I think there have been a couple of iterations of bike plans, but I'm not sure where it stands. So maybe somebody could just give us a little rundown on that.
I'd be happy to give the amateur version, and then Maria Tipping might want to weigh in as well, if she'd like. But from my perception and I'm not a professional bike planner in the way that Ashley is, or Maria Tipping or others on this call, but from the perspective of someone who bikes around here a lot, it seems that we have some excellent projects, but no plan. So if we have to tell a parent that their child is going to be quite safe 80% of the way to school this morning, I don't think we're there yet. And so I think with leadership from a number of city officials, including Maria Tipping is on this call, Claremont's made great strides, but currently there is no bike plan for the city of Claremont in terms of what should be the major arteries, what should be the priorities, how might we connect things. So as a consumer of all of this, that's one perspective.
I'll take a follow that. Good evening, everyone. Maria Tipping, city engineer with the city of Claremont. In terms of planning, bicycle planning, we have used the general plan. The mobility element has a component for bicycle planning and maps that shows the routes that we want to develop and to create that connectivity that is so important to help out with people feeling safe to bike. We also have a bicycle plan that unfortunately never got updated, but that bicycle plan took the map from the general plan, and that was used as basis for, we continue to use those streets designated, those important streets, designated as bicycle routes. And we took, in terms of planning, we took a step further back in 2019 we adopted a complete streets policy. So through the policy, we use opportunities through our maintenance program to look at the different streets that are due for maintenance, to look at adding these components that will make it safer and people feel more comfortable biking. Like the last opportunity that we had, we presented Sustainable Claremont was for Town Avenue. So Town Avenue is being reimagined or reinvented using bicycle, pedestrians, and accessibility components through that complete streets programming. I would like to add that funding is a big obstacle. I mean, we would love to do as many of these streets, you know, starting with the ones in front of the school. The city has always taken priority in looking at the streets where the schools are to provide improvements. Funding, I mean, we've used grants to do most of the projects, but it's very difficult to do a number of improvements. We have to wait and accumulate funding and go through the process to get those the different streets done. I mean, Mountain Avenue, one group talked about Mountain Avenue. That would be our next street. To a portion of Mountain received improvements through a grant. The portion south of Foothill Boulevard. Now moving forward, we are due for future maintenance in that same part. So we're going to look at the very same area that was done 10, 12 years ago to add more current improvements, more consistent with practices that will make people more comfortable and safe to bike.
Thanks, Maria. Really appreciate the work you do, and your explanation of that was great. Stuart, do we have any questions in? I don't see any in the chat.
Richard has a comment there, Hugh. He'd love to review the proposed flow of traffic at the intersection of Mills with Chaparral at the elementary school. Not sure if that data is available. I have another question too while I've got my microphone activated. Paul or Ashley or any one of the student researchers, I'd love to hear how you sort of respond to Maria's comments about funding, because I think that's like clearly one of the major hurdles that Claremont challenges is that, or excuse me, major challenges that Claremont faces as they look to implement more, complete street projects and develop a active transportation plan or a bike plan. Are there things that we ought to be pushing for that might be strong initial steps? So for instance, in some of the presentations, a couple of the things that were mentioned were things like folks parking in the bike lane during the drop off at the elementary school. And that seems like a parking enforcement issue that can maybe be remedied by having, police located at that area, or a bike infrastructure at Claremont High School, potentially having that relocated. Would it be something where we could work with Claremont Unified School District to see how to secure funding for that? So I guess what I'm asking is, like, what are some steps we could take right now that are realistic and more quick moving? And then what are some long-term strategies we can have to help push things forward? Sorry, long question.
Ashley, do you want to take a crack at some, because after all, Claremont's not the first city to encounter the reality that it's expensive to change infrastructure, and yet many cities are doing this while others are doing nothing. Do you want to say something about funding sources?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. There were a lot of parts of that question. So first I'll talk about the funding that Maria was mentioning. She's completely right. I mean, we know that these kinds of remedies cost quite a bit of money. For instance, the flashing beacons that a few of the students showed in their presentations, those run about $20,000 a piece, not including like the design work that has to go into it. That's just buying the tools to get them on the ground. And things that you would think would be inexpensive, like the striping that goes in for bike lanes, that also runs in the area of about $20,000 a mile. So these things seem like they would be simple to do, but they do cost quite a bit of money. And then you have to think about the upkeep, because every crosswalk that you paint has to be repainted every 2 to 3 years. So these things, you know, it's not just a quick fix that you can walk away from later. One of the things that we do at Alta is we work with communities to develop active transportation plans. So the things that Maria said they're using from the general plan, we work with communities to identify their priority projects in that. And then there are state resources that we can help communities apply to for grants. And a lot of that is need-based. A lot of them are based on the demographics of the community and, you know, just the highest need locations in those respects. But those programs do help fund a lot of these safe routes to school programs that we call them, and also active transportation improvements. And to answer the second part of your question about enforcement and those kinds of things, I mean, again, that does come back to resources when you think about it, right? Somebody's paying the police salary and we have to be cognizant of the demands on their time. But a lot of the ways that we think about transportation planning broadly and active transportation in particular, enforcement is one of the keys. We have education, enforcement, engineering, and a few other things that we talk of when we speak about how these things get implemented successfully. And enforcement is one of those, as well as education. So letting people know that, hey, you cannot park in the bike lane, that's not okay. And then enforcing it when that is not adhered to. So
if I might add just very briefly, it's also going to be important to think in terms of the cost that is currently borne by the community that does not have this infrastructure. So if we took 2,000 parents spending $100 per year for driving their kids to school on gas and automobile upkeep, that's $200,000 per year. It turns out that when kids have to be driven to school, it's women who are doing the chauffeuring. And so the cost of lost earnings, the cost of less leisure time and so forth in the community is very substantial. And so that's why a number of us are hoping that whether it's funds left over from the COVID assistance to Claremont or other creative funding mechanisms, that we might find ways to reduce the current costs on the community of fossil fuel dependence.
Great, thank you, Paul. I'm going to move on to another question. Ross Pringle asks, does anyone use the CROW manual from the Netherlands, CROW? And I might just add to that, if you could talk about the requirements in the manuals in general, and to what extent there is flexibility based on the jurisdiction that's overseeing the road, because sometimes what we hear is things can't happen because of either federal guidelines or California DOT guidelines. And yet there are some other manuals out there that are a little more permissive or a little more innovative, I think, in active transportation. So Ashley, maybe if you could take this question.
Sure. That's a great question, and it is something that a lot of folks are continually frustrated by. The CROW manual is great, but we try to take elements of the CROW manual and adapt them to what can be done legally in the US. Keep in mind that in the Netherlands, where the CROW manual originates, they don't have ADA laws. And a lot of what we design is either guided or limited, depending on how you look at it, by the requirements that are in place by the ADA Act. So that's one thing that we're contending with. and that's good, right? Like it's helping people be more mobile and walk more and be safer in doing so. But it does kind of separate Crow manual guidance from what the reality is on the ground in the US. Another thing to keep in mind is I've worked in states all across the country, and every state has its own set of rules for what's allowed and what's not allowed. And that is all overseen by the federal guidance that requires things like what do white stripes mean? What do yellow stripes mean? How does signal timing work? What are the colors on the faces? Like the MUTCD is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and it guides the regulations that let us learn how to drive in California, but then go to New York or Florida or Iowa and understand what all of the symbols and striping and those kinds of things mean. And within that world is starting to adapt slowly, but it does govern also what we can do with bikeways. And so even within that world, California has its own set of regulations as well, which determine what are our minimum lane widths, the kinds of devices that can be used in protected bikeways, all of these things. And I'm an engineer, I also do planning, but as an engineer, we have to deal with the liability. We have to stamp and seal any kind of engineering drawings that come out of our work, and that applies to bikeways as well. And there's a lot of concern within the engineering realm of the liability issues. So if you design something that's not consistent with these rules and regulations, and someone, heaven forbid, gets hurt or killed, a lot of that liability can come back on the engineer who sealed that design, and that's a lot of weight on your shoulders. So there is some reluctance in the engineering community to do something that has not already been blessed either by the state of California or the feds, because that liability does come back on the engineer who stamped it. So we want to do things that are innovative and useful, but we also need them to be as safe as they can be. And a lot of those rules are in place because, for 50 years of design practice, that's what was determined to be most safe. And whether that's applicable now or not in terms of how we can design bikeways, that world is shifting, but it's slow to do so.
Great, thank you, Ashley. It's really great to hear that perspective on that issue and that question. There's another question here from Peter Saeda. Says, I bike past Claremont High roughly every day. If my timing is poor, I am invited to negotiate cars driven by students aiming to enter the campus to park and parents aiming to pause or park on the west side of Indian Hill to drop off their students. I appreciate that the median is currently planted with lovely trees. I'm curious about the perspective of the students. Would it make more sense if we could start over to put bikes down the middle? So I think that is probably targeted for team 4 that looked at, or I'm sorry, team 3. Yes, yeah.
I believe we're team 2, but
oh, sorry.
Yeah, so we had a little mini team discussion on the side about your question, and we concluded that because it's going to be the students for riding on the majority of the bike lanes, and their primary objective is to access the school, it's a little bit dangerous to have the bike lanes down the center, because that means that any exit or entrance to the bike lanes would involve crossing across traffic, whether or not there's like a stop line or thing. Sorry, Prof. Saida, you're muted.
But they would be doing that at a crosswalk at the entry to the high school. So what it does is keep the bikes out of the way of the cars.
I would argue that it doesn't keep them much more out of the way of the cars. It keeps them out of the way of the parked cars, at least somewhat. But fundamentally, if a car has to make a left-hand turn, they're going to be going across those bike lanes, and the bike lanes are going to be less like flush with the sidewalk. So there's going to be less refuge for the cyclists, such as a curb, a sidewalk, etc. I see your point as far as kind of putting the bikes all in one place and away from the cars, but I think that fundamentally it exposes cyclists more to possible danger from cars, as opposed to something that would allow them to go on the sidewalk in case of a dangerous intersection, and also allows at least the people going on the west sidewalk to the west bike lane to enter directly into the school, and the people on the east bike lane to have to use a crosswalk where they can actually stop and go onto the sidewalk to press the light before they cross. But I do understand, as someone who's not a student at Claremont High School, for you as someone who's not a student at Claremont High School yet rides in the area, that might be a better design. So I thank you for bringing it up.
Great, thanks for that. Ingrid, I see that you responded to Professor Haskell's question about mills. Would you be able to just get on and explain your response? Great, thanks.
Yeah, I think the idea we were thinking about is like have the parents park along the two sides of North Mills Avenue, and then they would be able to turn into Chaparral and then keep going south. I have trouble sharing screen, but you can open the image on the chat.
Okay.
Does this work?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. Yeah, so the red would be where we're proposing parking lanes so that parents can park and like wait for their kids to come to walk over to or cross the road to get to the cars, or even like bike along those the biking lanes, and then parents could also turn in through into Chaparral and then down and then turn back into North Mills. Because currently I think a lot of parents do U-turn, and that also poses like a safety hazard.
Great, thanks, Ingrid. And it looks like we're coming up on time. We want to end right at 8 o'clock. There is a comment in here, or maybe it's a question about, it's from Ross Pringle about roundabouts for safer intersections. And Ashley, would you be able to respond to that very quickly?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
It was about what about roundabouts for safer intersections instead of lights or four-way stops?
So roundabouts can be safer for motorists. It decreases the number of collision points within the intersection. And also when collisions happen, they tend to be at lower speeds and at more oblique angles, which tend to have a higher survivability rate and lower injury rate than traditional intersections. Generally speaking, bicyclists are not allowed, you can't have bike lanes within the circular space of a roundabout. And the newer designs for roundabouts that incorporate bikeways have the bike facilities around the edge in the same general area that you would have sidewalks traditionally. And in that way, we're allowed, we have the ability to control the bikeway crossings at the entry and exit points for the roundabouts. So they can be really great for minimizing vehicle-to-vehicle collisions. But if you're going to have high volumes of pedestrians and bicyclists in that space, you need to be designing them in a way that is most safe. And often that takes a larger footprint for the intersection itself. It depends on what kind of volumes of vehicles we're talking about, but they can work, they just need to be designed correctly.
Just a quick comment. We had a test site in Claremont for a roundabout, and the visually impaired community, we had a few residents that are visually impaired they had a number of concerns with using the roundabout. That test site didn't work out, but that was a big concern.
All right. Well, thank you both for your responses to that. We're just about at time. And Paul, maybe I'll just ask the last quick question to you that actually Stuart put it in the chat. Could you tell us what your next steps are, what you and your students hope that we take or do with this presentation?
Absolutely. I mean, I can take a stab at that. I think that it's time for the community of Claremont to come together and make this happen. I hear, in our class, Bicycle Revolution, which is the class in which the student work is occurring. We visit cities throughout the entire LA region, and we speak with community leaders, elected officials, and others asking what it takes to create bike-friendly cities. And frequently, one hears that the formula for success is a combination of staff who are willing, elected officials who are on board, and an active community. And I would actually say Claremont has a willing staff, not every single staff member, but folks like Maria and many others who have both the expertise and the desire to do it. We have a lot of support at the political level. A couple of the elected officials who've been interacting with us on these topics during the semester were not able to make the meeting tonight, but are absolutely on board. I think the community needs a louder voice. I think through Sustainable Claremont and other means, we need to start showing up at meetings, asking important questions, finding the money, providing the inspiration for our elected officials to find the money to make this happen. College towns, Davis is the most bike-friendly city in the United States. It's the one that had the first bike path in the United States. College towns like this one are well positioned to be regional leaders. But I can tell you currently, if you were to array the cities of the Los Angeles region from most bike-friendly to least, Claremont on a 0 to 10 is somewhere around a 3, maybe a 4, relative to what other cities are doing. I would say Pomona is already passing us by. I would say the city of Orange is already passing us by. Long Beach is passing us by. Santa Monica's passed us by. Culver City's passed us by. We're doing better than Ontario, but I'm going to tell you, I think we should raise the bar and make this happen. And as Stuart's pointing out, there's other commissions short of city council that folks could show up to and express their point of view, including points of view that might disagree with my own. I think that's even more valuable. But so I think citizens need to really start to make a push and support the city in making this happen.
Great. Thank you very much. So we're at time, and we'll end here. There are a few more comments or questions, and we'll try and get those answered at some point and get back to you with those. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, students. Ashley, Paul. This was very invigorating discussion, very worthwhile, and let's hope that there are some more discussions to come. Thanks all.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Evening, everyone.